All right, let's prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, and I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. And now, if you just put your hand over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. And now, if you just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms, I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. Okay. The spiritual truth that I'm working with is that you are always at choice. You are always at choice. Folks, we have plenty of seats over on this side, just in case you want to make that choice, okay? All right. So the choices go in different, levels. Sometimes the choice is easy. Do I want to have salmon? Do I want to have pork? That's an easy choice. No harm there. Then they up a little bit when money is involved. Do I want to join Weight Watchers or do I want to join Jenny Craig? Still not earth-shattering, but it involves some money, so you're thinking more about it. And then they can get so high that they get painful. Those painful choices like, do I want to stay in this relationship where I know I have food on the table for my kids and a roof over my head, even though I'm being emotionally or physically abused? Or do I want to go out and see if I can make it on my own? That's a tougher choice. It's a tougher choice when you say, do I want to stay in this job that is eating my soul up, or do I want to take a risk and get a new job? Those are tougher choices. And sometimes they're so tough that we hear ourselves saying things like, I don't feel like I have a choice. But the truth is, we always are at choice. Always we're at choice. And when we can live with that understanding that we are always at choice, we begin to leave what I consider to be the most difficult and challenging of the human conditions, and that's the human condition of being stuck. That condition of being stuck, where we've all been at times because we couldn't figure out the choice. Now, it's much easier to make these kinds of choices if we are people of faith. If we are people of faith. And I'm not talking about faith in a religion. I'm talking about faith in a power for good in the universe that is available to you and I all of the time. That's the kind of faith that I'm talking about. And when we really have that kind of faith, when we affirm, I live in a universe where there is a power for good that is available to me all of the time, we leave skepticism, we leave cynicism, we leave that area of being stuck in our lives. Because no matter which way we go, there's something there for us. Cynicism and skepticism are nothing more than protections that we have for our lives. They're protections because we believe that there's something out there that will hurt us. What will hurt us is not out there. What will hurt us is right in here. Those thoughts of lack, those thoughts of limitation, that's what hurt us. When we don't understand that we live in an abundant universe, a universe of plenty of everything, plenty of money, plenty of food, plenty of shelter, plenty of men for men and women who are looking for men. So don't email me. Plenty of women for men and women who are looking for women. Okay, we got it all covered. There's plenty of everything. All right? When we live in that kind of a consciousness, we're much less able to get stuck in our lives. Here's what happens. What happens is that instead of thinking about what's right now available to us in this land of plenty, 70% of our thoughts every single day are focused on what has happened to us in the past. 70% of what you're thinking today is focused on what has happened to you in the past. Now, 20% is focused on what might happen to you in the future. You know, the stock market might crash. I might get left. I might lose my job. Might happen. Now we're at 90%. 70% past, 20% future, 90%. Leaves us 10%. And you know, while in the big picture, that's kind of sad, let's at least make use of the 10%. The 10% to get a new thought. Turn to a neighbor and say, get a new thought. Because, see, that's really what we need to do, is when we get a new thought, when we get a brand new thought, it opens us up to more new thoughts. Well, sometimes I say in this church, we are not an anything goes church. Because, you know, when you come to a church that doesn't tell you what to think, it's easy to think that there's nothing that you need to think about. Okay? But the truth is, we are a church with powerful, powerful beliefs, and we want you to believe in them. Well, I'm going to be doing a little series on some beliefs that we have here. It's the longer version of the 4 beliefs. What I took was I really went into deep prayer and meditation with these 13 beliefs, and I boiled them down to the 4 beliefs that we do on Sunday. But if I'm backing them back out, there are much more detailed explanations of those 4 beliefs. It's written in a book called Living the Science of Mind. For those of you who are visiting, we are a Science of Mind church. We study the philosophy of Ernest Holmes. And what Ernest Holmes did was he took all of the things that were common in those religions and in Greek philosophy, and he wrote them down in this philosophy called Science of Mind. He wrote a book called Living the Science of Mind, and in this book, there are a number of chapters that are just essays that are written about life situations, and he wrote an essay about them. In the book also are these 13 beliefs that he detailed out. So we're going to take them, I don't know how long the series will go, till when I want to get a new series going. That's how long it'll go. Okay, but right now, we're at the first declaration of belief. And the belief is we believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one, indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all of creation, but it is not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. Now, truthfully, Ernest Holmes never met a word he didn't like. And that's why these are so detailed. But we're going to break them down because it's powerful stuff. It's really powerful thing. We're going to take the last 4 words in the first sentence, which is God is alive. God is alive. You know, sometimes we read ancient texts, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, other ancient texts, and we get put to sleep to this notion that God is over and left us some breadcrumb clues. God is not over. God's clues are happening every single day, every moment of every day. God is leaving us information. See, we get tricked into that thinking that because God is over and God is old and God is probably somewhere in the sky anyway and doesn't really understand today's pressures, nothing could be further from the truth. We think God doesn't understand parenting pressures. God understands parenting pressures and business pressures and dating pressures and relationship pressures. God is on that job for us 24/7, giving us information all of the time, but not in some codependent way. God is not a God who will come down and fix it for us. God will give us the information to help us live a life of wholeness in every area of our lives. See, God doesn't move until we give God the signal for ourselves to move. When we give God that signal, things happen. If we really not just lip service, but if we give a belief signal that things will move. Let me tell you a story. Last week we gave away $10,000. And the week before, Brenda was teaching my class, and she said, if anybody wants to buy a ticket, I have some tickets to the 50-50 raffle. She said, Brenda understands this entirely well, this science and the science of mind. And she says, whether you win or not, whether you get the $10,000 or not, you have just signaled the universe that you are interested in having $10,000, that you want $10,000. Well, the woman came to church, did not win the $10,000. I have a surprise for you later about that. But right now, she did not win the $10,000. And so she went home that day, and on the message machine was a message from her aunt saying, I want to start a college fund for your daughter. I'm not sure how much I'll put in it right now, but the bank will be letting you know. The very next day, the bank called and told her that there was $10,000 in the bank account for her daughter's fund. She signaled the universe that she was open. I want you to signal the universe. Start signaling the universe that which you want. Declare what you want to be available to it, to be open to it, to be welcoming for it in your life. And don't wait until your molehills become mountains. Signal the universe when things are small in your life before they become great big drama things. See, we're still working with this idea that God is too busy for the little things. Now, it's true. God is not your bellhop. But God is waiting for you to signal. Ernest Holmes says it this way. He says, your thought is an impress, and the mind, and the general mind, the great mind, God's mind, and a mold is formed. And when the mold is formed, then it becomes into manifestation. See, God never judges whether it's a big thing or a little thing, and God is never too busy. Your mother may have been too busy. Your banker may be too busy. Your doctor may be too busy. God is never too busy for you. God is never too busy for what it is that you want in your life. The passage also reminds us that God is absolute. Ernest Holmes says God is an absolute God. And that means that God is not wishy-washy. Happy one day, not so happy the next. Generous one day, stingy the next. That is not who God is. God is the same all of the time, which is abundantly generous with us and for us all of the time. And the most important thing I'm going to say all day is that God is not affected by your opinions or the opinions of anybody else. When you are ready to be welcoming and to accept and to put out that which it is that you want in a believing state of mind, that's when God responds. And it doesn't matter whether your great Aunt Minnie thinks it's a good idea or your husband or your wife or anybody else thinks it's a good idea. It is simply when you put it out there. If anybody says you need to wait, oh yes, I know you prayed, but God wants you to wait for the answer. God does not want you to wait a nanosecond. God doesn't want you to wait. Now, somewhere in your subconscious or your conscious, you may want to wait. But if you're not, your prayers are not being answered. If the mold is not there, it's not because of God. It's because you are asking yourself to wait until you become of a mind that is ready to welcome it in. Somebody say, I'm ready. I'm ready. Say it again, I'm ready. I love the 11 o'clock. The 9 o'clock, I say, somebody say, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. Okay. Good news is God's right there. God hears. God's got great hearing. Okay. All right. It also says in this passage, God is indestructible. God is indestructible. The presence of God in you is indestructible. You cannot hurt God. You cannot hurt your soul. You cannot kill your soul. You can't hurt the presence of God that is within you. It is indestructible. I have a friend whose mother would say when she made a mistake when she was a little girl, "You just made Jesus cry." Okay? So if you are that little boy or that little girl, you never made Jesus. Jesus never cried about any little mistake you made or big mistake you made. That's not going to happen. You're not going to make God cry. God is indestructible and with you all of the time. Let me read the passage again. We believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. See, God is in and through all of creation. God is the ultimate practitioner. You know, practitioners won't get absorbed in your whatever you've created in your life either. They simply won't get absorbed in it. They'll listen to your story with love and with compassion, but they're not going to get in your story. They're not going to become a part of your posse. They're not going to take sides in whatever's going on with you. And that's how God works as well. God does not take sides, and God does not get in the story. God is in everything. God is in gang violence, waiting for the call. God is in the diagnosis, waiting for the call. God is in your bank account, waiting for the call. God is in your relationships, waiting for the call. Not absorbed in it. Didn't get depressed by it. Didn't get upset by it. Just standing there waiting for the call. You know, we teach very strongly in this church that God is not in the sky. But I want to remind us that God, the innermost God and the outermost God, is the same God, because sometimes I think it's helpful for us to see God in the sky, or God above whatever it is we've created for ourselves that we are so absorbed in that we can't see the presence of God within ourselves. So we have to look up. We have to look up. The innermost God and the outermost God is the same God. Now, be clear. We have to bring that back into our heart before we can truly move forward. But sometimes, before we can even do that, we have to look up and ask God. Somebody said, "Do you ever visualize God?" Sometimes I see God for me personally as Popeye. I need a big old strong God that's going to help me do something big, see? And that helps for me. Ernest Holmes says, God is not a person, but you can personalize God. I know friends who have to see God in the feminine. There's no wrong with that. It's perfect. The innermost God and the outermost God is the same God. Well, lastly, this passage reminds us that the manifest universe is the body of God. Everything is the body of God. That beautiful song is the body of God. The beautiful singer is the body of God. This stand is the body of God. The chair you're sitting on is the body of God. The person you're sitting next to is the body of God. Why is that so important that he put it right up here in the beginning of what we believe? Because if we could get this one idea that everything and everybody is the manifest body of God, there would be no more wars. There would be no more wars. There would be no challenging calls for love. You know, what happened last week is heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And we need time to grieve that situation. We need to take time to grieve the loss of those beings of light who one television person said their light was snuffed out too young. Don't make a mistake. Their light was not snuffed out. Their life was not snuffed out. It burns brightly wherever it is right now. Their light burns brightly. But we need to take time to grieve in our hearts for what happened. But the thing that happened in Texas and the thing that happened in Boston are not accidents. They are consequences. And as spiritual beings, we need to understand that so that we can begin to up-level the thinking that goes on here. One of the most flammable businesses on the planet is the making of fertilizer, and yet that plant had not been inspected in 22 years. Now look, if we don't pay attention, the universe will get our attention. It's a consequence. Boston is so tragic. It's absolutely, totally tragic. But I'm going to tell you that there's only one answer to terrorism. Now, I want us to do all of these little measures that we're doing until we get to that one answer for terrorism. But there's only one answer for terrorism. One. And that's oneness. That's oneness. That's to stop making other people other. I don't know what tragedy happened to those young boys, and I'm certainly not excusing their behavior. But until we stop hating each other and allowing children to watch us hate each other, and in some cases making them take part in hating each other, it's not an accident. It's a consequence. Let me read you. I'm going to finish this morning with a story by a young Palestinian man. As a child, I fought the occupation by raising the Palestinian flag in our playground. We never felt safe. We were always running from jeeps to avoid the soldiers beating us. Our homes were invaded and children were killed. At the age of 12, I joined a demonstration where a boy was shot by a soldier. I watched him die in front of me. From that moment, I developed deep need for revenge. I became a group whose mission was to get rid of the catastrophe that had come to our town. We called ourselves freedom fighters, but outside the world called us terrorists. At first, we just threw stones and empty bottles. But when we came across some discarded hand grenades in a cave, we decided to hurl them at the Israeli jeeps. 2 of them exploded. No one was injured, but we were caught, and in 1985, at the age of 17, I received a 7-year prison sentence. In prison, we were treated like heroes by the other prisoners, but our jailers taught us how to continue hating and resisting. On October 1st, 1987, all 120 of us, all teenage boys, were waiting to go to the dining room when the alarm suddenly went off. Over 100 armed soldiers appeared and ordered us to strip naked. They beat us until we could hardly stand. I was held the longest and beaten the hardest. What struck me was that all the soldiers wore smiles on their face. They were hurting us without hatred, because for them this was just a training exercise, and they saw us as objects. As I was being beaten, I remembered a movie I'd seen a year before the Holocaust. At the time, I'd been happy that Hitler had killed 6 million Jews. I remember wishing he'd killed them all, because then I could never have been sent to prison. But some minutes into the movie, I felt myself crying and feeling angry that the Jews were being herded into gas station chambers without fighting back. If they knew they were going to die, why didn't they scream out? I tried to hide my tears from the other prisoners. They wouldn't have understood why I was crying without pain of my oppressors. It was the first time I felt empathy. So now, walking between the soldiers who were beating me, I remembered the movie and I started screaming at them, murderers, Nazis, oppressors, and as a consequence, I felt no pain. The incident with the soldiers made me realize that we had to preserve our humanity, our right to laugh and our right to cry, in order to save ourselves. I also slowly realized that the Israeli oppression was because of the Holocaust, and I decided to try and understand who the Jews were. This led to a conversation with a prison guard. The guards all thought of us as terrorists, and we hated them. But this guard asked me, "How can someone quiet like you become a terrorist?" I replied, "No, you're the terrorist. I'm a freedom fighter. I really believe that we, the Palestinians, were the settlers, not the Israelis." I said, "If you can convince me that we are the settlers, then I'll declare this in front of all of the prisoners." It was the start of a dialogue and a friendship. We discovered many similarities some months later, and the guard said he understood now that we were not the settlers. He even became a supporter of the Palestinian struggle. From then on, he always treated us with respect, and once even smuggled 2 big bottles of Coca-Cola, which I shared with the other prisoners. Seeing how this transformation happened through dialogue and without force made me realize that the only way to peace was through nonviolence. Our dialogue enabled us both to see each other's purity of heart and good intention. This man became he was released from jail and became a peacemaker. And 3 years, or about 5 years after he was out of jail, his 2.5-year-old daughter was gunned down in a fight, a border fight. And he continued to be a peacemaker. He continued to work for oneness. You and I need to do that. This is a very frightening time for Muslims in this country. Every time this kind of an event happens, you and I have an opportunity to speak highly of Muslims, even change subjects in conversation where it's not even warranted to be talking about it. Talk about it. When you see somebody at a 7-Eleven and they might be a Muslim, just smile at them bigger. Treat them more kindly, more softly than maybe you have last week. People of faith have a great opportunity now to not only know this truth of oneness, that the manifest body of God is in and through everything, but also to express it, to share it. Let's take this message into prayer. Knowing that there is a power and the presence and a glory of God that is shining on us right now and shining on every single person of faith and people who don't know they're people of faith. God is shining right now. The light of love, the light of wisdom, the light of intelligence is shining right now. That we are all moving for the highest thought. I declare that. I see it. I feel it. That we're moving for the highest thought for one another. That peace is not only possible, it is true. And so we just simply uncover anything unlike peace in our vision right now to see that truth. I give thanks for this. I release this word into the law, and together we say, so it is.